Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm going to review the film Wicked, or as it should be called, Wicked Part 1. So this film is based on the play Wicked, which is based on the book, which is based on the movie The Wizard of Oz, which is based on the book The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. So as you can see, this movie was a long time in the making, spanning back decades of source material, and now we are finally getting this Wicked play adaptation, which a lot of people are very, very excited for. As you can see, the box office results are crazy for this movie. People are loving it. And I had pretty moderate expectations going in. I had seen the stage play earlier this year on Broadway, and I enjoyed it immensely. I didn't think it was an amazing play. Like, some people rave over Wicked. Like, some people think it's, like, the best thing ever. I really liked it. I just don't know if I could say it was, like, my favorite play that I've seen. But, you know, just from my showing alone, you can tell there's so many people who really, really love this play. And I can see why. And going into the film, I also really like John M. Chu as a director. He recently did the film In the Heights, which is also a musical. And honestly, I think that musical, just as a play, is probably one of the best I've seen in a really long time. Like, it is an incredible play, incredible movie. I love In the Heights. Honestly, I mean, I know it's still early in the decade, but right now it's probably still in, like, my top 10 or so of the decade right now. I love In the Heights. But as I mentioned with Wicked, this movie is only part one of the play, so it's really just the first act of the two-act structure. And, the movie kind of goes until around the intermission point. And despite only being this first act, the movie is basically the full length of the play. Like, if the play is around 2 hours and 40 minutes with two parts, this one movie, just half the play, is also around 2 hours and 40 minutes. So, my thought going in was, like, why did you have to split it into two parts? Is this really necessary? The trailers for this movie looked good, but they didn't blow me away. I thought, like, it looked well made and everything. I just wasn't, like, totally convinced yet of why this movie needed to be made the way it was. I was just really skeptical if this would be a necessary split to tell the story better, or if it was just like a money-making ploy to get people to see the movie twice and, get twice as much profit off the same thing. Because I feel like sometimes that was kind of the trend in Hollywood, a decade ago. Everything was part one, part two, like Hunger Games, Harry Potter, and we're kind of returning to that a bit now with, like, Fast and Furious, Spider-Verse, Dune, a lot of part one, part twos, and, I feel like it really has to be very well done to justify two parts, especially when they're this long. But I do trust John M. Chu as a director. I was really hopeful he would do it right, and I can say this movie does justify its runtime, but I'm not sure if it does anything so outstanding that this movie couldn't be done in just one movie. Like, I think the jury is still out on that. We'll see what part two has in store next year. But right now, I think the movie does do a very good job with its runtime. Like, I don't think there was anything really in this movie that I was like, you really should have cut this out. You really needed to cut that to make this shorter. But I also think there is a reality where you could have made, this whole movie in just one giant, like, 3.5 hour movie with both parts, and I think gotten a very similar effect. We'll see, though. We'll see. I will, I'm willing to be stand corrected on that, but right now I'm still fine with this as part one. I think it works. And with all that being said, as part one of this stage play, I think this movie is probably about as good, if not better, than what I remember of it. Like, as I said, I liked the play a lot. When I saw it on Broadway, I didn't quite love it. I think, though, this movie, and maybe it's just because I've seen it already, I can't really, like, say, because sometimes when you see an adaptation of something, you're just kind of, like, remembering how you felt about it the first time. It's kind of like watching it again. But my thought was, I think I enjoyed this movie more than I enjoyed that same part of the play. And I don't know if that's just because I knew what to expect more, or if it's because it actually was better, but I just found it to be very effective in what it was trying to do. I actually do think this is a really, really good movie. And it all starts with the cast. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are terrific. I wouldn't be shocked if either of them or both of them are up for Oscar nominations later in the year. They are both really terrific here and really just carry the movie with these characters. You feel everything they feel, and they show so much emotion and passion and charisma, and just the way they play off each other is so fun, and one of the best parts of the movie for sure. And something I'll note is when I saw the play, that the people who were playing these characters, Elphaba and Glinda, were good, but I think Erivo and Grande bring something to these characters that I felt was missing on Broadway, at least with the people I saw. And, to anyone listening, I saw this in, January 2024, so it's pretty recent I saw it still. If you've seen the play recently, and, you kind of have seen the play maybe before that, you can probably tell me if I'm correct in that maybe they just weren't as good as some of the other people who played these roles. But I just felt like, and this is a problem I have, I think, with Broadway shows sometimes, like in theater, like Broadway theatrical theater, is that I think acting to me is just very over the top, especially when it's like, you have a character like Glinda who's so, loud and, very enthusiastic all the time. I think it's like played double down, on Broadway, and it kind of becomes a little bit irritating to me. So I think that took away a little bit from what I really wanted to love about the play. But here, Ariana Grande plays Glinda with the same passion you want from her, but also this nice subtlety and this sort of quiet performance at times that really hits hard when it needs to. And Ariana Grande is very funny and lighthearted and loud, but as I said, not in an annoying way here. She is just very charming and also has a few scenes where she gets more dramatic, and it works quite well. Cynthia Erivo, as I said, was just also really terrific as Elphaba, and just brings the character to life in a way that I really appreciated. She just really has this nice tension to her. She's serious, but also kind of funny, and just has a lot going on. There's a lot brewing in that performance that I really liked. And Erivo plays this role with just so much life and passion and emotion. She has a lot of major scenes throughout the movie, and she is spot on in all of them. Sometimes even just with her facial expressions, she says so much on her face. And, I think it's a bit easier to translate from Broadway, but still, she does an incredible job. Very good vocals from both of them, too. They're both very good singers, as we all know, especially with Ariana Grande. She's a good singer. I think both of them just really killed it in the role. The chemistry between the two is practically perfect, and really, again, just is one of my favorite parts of this movie, if not my favorite part of this movie. The supporting cast is also very, very good. You have some people like Peter Dinklage, Michelle Yeoh, and Jeff Goldblum, who are pretty big standouts here. None of them are scene stealers per se, but I think they all just do a really good job with the roles they have. Jeff Goldblum, especially towards the end, always just brings this comedy with him and just the way he talks and everything that, I don't know, it just livens things up a bit. I love Jeff Goldblum. But Peter Dinklage, Michelle Yeoh are also very good here. And John M. Chu, as a director, was a great choice for this film. He shows that he has a lot of passion for these characters, along with the cast, and simply wants to get them right. You can just tell he loves this play and this story, and really just wants to nail it. He wants to do it as well as he can, partly maybe why he split it into two parts, because he just really wants to make sure he can let the story breathe and take its sweet time to get it right. But I really like Chu's visual style during musical numbers. He knows how to make them feel just very interesting on a visual level without overdoing it. Some people just really get a little crazy. Mean Girls earlier this year, that was also an adaptation of a Broadway musical. I think that movie was just a little too heavy on style, and at points it just kind of became a little overbearing. And you certainly noticed it. You really noticed the style. but I think it was just one of those cases where it was almost a little distracting. Like here in Wicked, it's very stylish. It has style to it, but it's not like overbearing, and it still lets you focus on the lyrics and the songs and really appreciate what it's doing. And also, Chu does a very good job with the smaller scenes as well. He lets these scenes really breathe and take their time, and I appreciate that. I mean, if that's why this movie had to be split into two parts, I can totally get behind that. Because there's just so many moments here that I think benefit from really just being long and just really like getting to soak into everything. I don't remember the play being like super quick when I saw it. I just don't really know what exactly was added here, but it just works. Whatever they added here, I think it just works to let things just brew more. There's one scene I want to note that took place at a ball in the movie that is fantastic. There's really not a lot of speaking, not at all. It's just moving and dancing, but it moved me a lot and really left an impact, and I think it's just kind of a giant, like, summarization of what this movie does so well, which, you know, it's just a pretty long scene, and there's really not much talking. Like, you would hear a pin drop in the theater, and it's just perfect. It's a great, great scene. But speaking of taking its time, I really don't know where this movie added an hour from the musical, because it only feels like 2 hours to me, not 2.5, like it's, you know, its actual runtime. It feels a lot shorter than it is. It does start a little bit on the slow side, like, you know, the first half hour maybe, you can kind of feel the pace a little bit, but once it kind of kicks in, it really just goes by. And the movie is very well paced generally. It still feels though like it tells the story in full and doesn't rush anything. It really just, it does feel satisfying in the end. Like, I don't feel like it's one of those times where the movie ended, you know, on this big cliffhanger, and I still just felt, you know, it's not, I didn't feel like, oh, like you had to end there. Like, I feel like it was earned. It was an earned ending, and I think it earns the two parts. And if the movie did spend its time developing the characters and the relationships more, it works, because I think I got more emotional watching this movie than I remember during the play. I think there was a little backstory added here that wasn't in the play. All I know is once this movie really got to, like, the peak point, you know, like in the second half, and things are getting crazy and really, like, emotional, I felt it. Like, I really felt it here. And, you know, you feel it on Broadway, too, because it's live, but I think it's even a little harder to really, like, translate that emotion on screen than just seeing, like, real people right in front of you act. And I think I felt even more emotional watching this movie than I did the play. I just really felt these moments between the characters, and I think that's largely due to the performances, largely due to the direction, very good storytelling here, and it just did a great job. The movie also spaces out songs very well, doesn't overdo it, gives a lot of breathing room in between songs, but I wasn't ever sitting there waiting for another one or thinking it was too many. It just, you know, it has good breathing room. I just didn't feel like the songs were too overbearing, wasn't too many, wasn't too little. It just worked. And also I want to shout out great production design in this movie. There's so many practical effects and sets, which is awesome. You can really even see pictures online of, like, they literally built so much for this movie, and it shows. There's a lot of really impressive set pieces and just design. I think this has a very good chance of actually maybe even winning Best Production Design at the Oscars, because it's really just awesome what they achieved here. And the CGI is also pretty convincing when it's there, though I have to note there are a few iffy-looking shots that did take me out of the movie a little bit. But overall, CGI is pretty convincing. You know, there's a lot of animals in the movie, so it has to kind of do that. And it's convincing enough. I bought into it. But I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of the way this movie looks. It's probably one of my bigger problems. The color grading is definitely too muted, and the lighting is kind of ugly in some areas. I've seen a lot of people point this out online. And, like, I don't think it ruins the movie for me. Like, it doesn't, like, really bump it down, you know, a whole lot of notches, but I think it's important to really just get the look right. And you can just see how much money went into the movie. Like, there's a ton of money that went into it. I think, though, the muted colors and stuff, the more, like, realistic looking movie just takes away a little bit from, like, the magic of it all. It just kind of looks a little bit too drab and dull. I see what they were going for, but I just think, like, it's the Wizard of Oz. It's not supposed to be, like, that realistic. I think you can afford to give a little more saturation, a little more color. That's just me, but I think they would have benefited from that. And another one of my issues with the film is that some character motives, especially towards the end, feel kind of unexpected and sudden. I wish the movie chose to spend a little more time on that, but it's still TBD on if we get more in part 2. So that criticism could go away depending on how part 2 handles it. To be completely honest, I don't remember if the musical on Broadway really did address this later on. I just know that I kind of had this thought while watching the musical too, and that just a few of the character moments just felt very, like, sudden and out of character. I just kind of feel like they could have, just kind of let them breathe a little more. I feel like with how much more time this movie has than the play, I think it could have afforded to let them brew these moments just a little longer and take a little more time. But, as a whole, this is a very safe but well-told version of this musical. I was really satisfied by the end of it, despite it only being half the story. I think it's so well done. And I hope it can keep the same momentum going in part 2, because it really doesn't have that amazing show-stopping, defying gravity moment or any other standout songs from memory. So it's kind of like, the Stephen King book It, where, part 1 is always going to be more interesting than part 2. But we'll see. I trust in John M. Chu. He did a really great job here, so I hope he can deliver in part 2 and really give the same level of dedication to it. I'm sure it'll be well made if nothing else, but I hope it at least still has a lot to like, and I really look forward to it. But after this film, I have faith in John M. Chu and co. will deliver more of what I liked here, and hopefully deliver an epic finale. If you didn't like the musical, this likely won't change your mind. I don't think this movie's going to win you over if you didn't like it. If you did like the musical, you'll probably find even more to love here. I mean, my audience was, like, cheering and clapping throughout. They loved it. But if you're like me and liked the play but didn't, like, salivate over it, you weren't like, this is the best thing ever, I think you'll find this is probably one of, if not the best version of it out there, and it's a really great adaptation. I mean, it took so many years for this movie to get made. It's been in production for so long, and we literally got Cats, of all things, in its place back in 2019. It was supposed to come out even before COVID, but I have to say, the wait was worth it. So I'm going to give this movie an A-. It was a B+ when I first walked out, but I think it's kind of bumping up a little bit as I think about it a little more. I can't wait to see it again. Go see it if you're interested. I'd recommend it highly. But remember, no singing during the movie, please. Respect your fellow audience members. They paid as much money as you did to be there. They want to be there as much. No one wants to hear you shout out your lungs in the movie theater. I promise you, you can do that at home. But just go see it. It's an awesome movie. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve this show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.